The pounding on Sarah's door came at 2 in the morning. When she opened it, Tyler stood there, her best friend of 5 years, the steady single dad who never asked for anything, with blood on his knuckles and terror in his eyes. "Just one night," he said, voice breaking. "Please, Sarah, they took Lily." 4 hours until sunrise. 4 hours to find his 8-year-old daughter before the ransom deadline. But this wasn't a random kidnapping. The note said it all. "Remember Brett Carson?" Sarah saw it then. The shadow of who Tyler used to be. 10 years buried but never gone. He'd been an enforcer, a debt collector, who broke bones and destroyed families. Now someone from that past had his little girl, and the only way to get her back was to face every sin he thought he'd outrun. Sometimes redemption doesn't come quietly. Sometimes it kicks down your door at 2 a.m. and gives you until dawn to prove you've really changed. Sarah Mitchell had known Tyler Brooks for 5 years, and in all that time, she'd never seen him afraid. Not when Lily spiked a fever of 104. Not when his truck broke down with no money to fix it. Not when the school called about bullies. Tyler was the steady one, the rock, the man who handled things without falling apart. But standing in her doorway at 2 in the morning with blood on his hands and his voice cracking around words that didn't want to come out, he looked like a man who'd run out of steady. He looked like a man drowning. The hallway light behind him flickered, casting his face in alternating shadow and yellow illumination. His t-shirt was torn at the collar. His jeans had dirt on the knees. And his right hand, the one that fixed carburetors and braided Lily's hair and helped Sarah carry groceries up 3 flights of stairs, was wrapped in what might have been a kitchen towel, but was now soaked dark red. Tyler. Sarah's training kicked in before her shock could. 5 years in the ER had taught her to assess first, react later. "Come inside. What happened?" He pushed past her, moving like his legs had forgotten their purpose. His hands shook as he pulled a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket and held it out. Sarah took it, unfolding it carefully. Cheap notebook paper. The kind that came in packs of 500. The message was written in block letters, deliberate and controlled. "You have until sunrise. Come alone. Follow the trail you left 10 years ago, or your daughter dies. Remember Brett Carson? He remembers you." Sarah read it twice. The words didn't change. She looked up at Tyler, who'd moved to her kitchen sink and was running cold water over his knuckles. Blood spiraled down the drain in pink ribbons. His jaw was clenched so tight, she could see the muscle jumping beneath his skin. "Who's Brett Carson?" she asked. Tyler shut off the water, didn't turn around. "Someone I hurt. A long time ago." "How long?" 10 years. He finally looked at her, and Sarah saw the weight of a decade in his eyes. Lines she'd never noticed before. Shadows that went deeper than exhaustion. "Before Lily. Before I became this." Sarah set the note on her counter. Outside, the city was holding its breath in that dead space between late night and early morning. Her wall clock said 2:17. Sunrise in Seattle this time of year came around 6:30. 4 hours and 13 minutes. She thought about Lily, 8 years old, obsessed with dinosaurs, who called her Aunt Sarah and drew pictures of velociraptors with too many teeth, somewhere out there in the dark. "Tell me," Sarah said. Tyler leaned against the counter, like it was the only thing keeping him upright. "I was a debt collector, not the kind who sends letters, the kind they sent when you stopped answering your phone. I worked for a man who loaned money to people who couldn't get it from banks, and when they couldn't pay it back, I made them understand what happened next." The cold thing that settled in Sarah's chest felt like ice water. She'd known Tyler had a past. Everyone did. But she'd imagined something vague. Petty theft, maybe. Bar fights. Not this. Not professional violence. "I was good at it," Tyler continued, his voice gone flat and mechanical. Didn't ask questions. Didn't care about their sob stories. just did the job. Brett Carson owed $50,000. Borrowed it to save his construction business, but the economy tanked and he couldn't pay. My boss wanted an example made, so I made one. What did you do? Beat him in front of his co-workers at the construction site where he was foreman. Put him in the hospital for 2 months. Tyler's hands gripped the counter edge. His wife left him while he was still in recovery. He lost custody of his daughter because of the domestic violence charges. She blamed him for the stress, the debt, everything. His whole life came apart, and it was because of me. Sarah looked at the man she'd called her best friend for 5 years. The man who coached Lily's soccer team and fixed cars for single mothers in the neighborhood and never asked for a dime. The man who'd sat with Sarah when her father died and just held her hand for 3 hours without saying a word. Under all that, apparently, was someone else. Someone who'd destroyed lives for money. And now he has Lily, Sarah said. The note was on my porch, with her backpack. Tyler's voice cracked. She was at a sleepover, at Emma Rodriguez's house. I called. Her mom said Lily went to the bathroom around midnight and never came back. Window was open. No sign of a break-in, no noise. Nothing. Did you call the police? Note says if I do, he'll know. He'll kill her. Tyler started pacing. 3 steps one direction, 3 steps back. Caged animal energy. He wants me to follow some kind of trail, places from when I did the work, places he knows I'll remember. Sarah watched him move back and forth across her small kitchen. This was Tyler, who made chocolate chip pancakes on Saturday mornings. Tyler, who taught Lily to ride a bike and cried when she finally did it without training wheels. Tyler, who remembered everyone's birthday and showed up with flowers when you least expected it. But under that was someone who'd beaten a man so badly his family abandoned him. You need help, she said. I can't risk the police. Can't risk. He stopped mid-stride, ran both hands through his hair. Sarah, I don't know what else to do. I have 4 hours. If I mess this up, I lose everything. Sarah thought about her nice, orderly life, hospital shifts, and Netflix and her book club on Thursdays. How easy it would be to tell Tyler to leave, to call the cops herself, to stay out of whatever nightmare he'd created a decade ago. But then she thought about Lily, 3 days ago, showing her a crayon drawing of a T-Rex eating pizza, giggling about how dinosaurs probably didn't like pepperoni, 8 years old and full of light. Okay, Sarah said. 4 hours. Where do we start? The relief that crashed across Tyler's face was almost physical. Thank you. God, Sarah, don't thank me yet. She grabbed her jacket from the hook by the door. Where's the first place? Tyler pulled out his phone, showed her a photo he'd taken of the note's reverse side, another address in the same block letters. I know this. Warehouse on the east side, place where I used to get my assignments. Sarah checked for her phone, her keys, her hospital ID out of pure habit. Her mind was already shifting into crisis mode, the same way it did when trauma rolled through the ER doors. Assess, prioritize, act. Don't think about the blood. Just move. Then that's where we go. They took Tyler's truck, a beat-up Ford F-150 that smelled like motor oil, and Lily's strawberry lip gloss. Sarah climbed into the passenger seat and watched empty streets slide past the windows, streetlights making orange pools on wet asphalt. Tyler drove too fast, knuckles white on the steering wheel. The silence felt thick enough to choke on. Finally, Sarah said, "Tell me about her. About Lily. How did you end up with her?" Tyler's jaw unclenched slightly. Her mother was someone I knew back then. We weren't together, just crossed paths a few times. She showed up at my apartment 8 years ago with a 3-month-old baby. Said she couldn't do it. Said she was leaving town, and I could either take Lily or she'd leave her at a fire station. He glanced at Sarah, then back at the road. I took her, and that was it. That was the moment I knew I couldn't be that person anymore. Couldn't be the guy who hurt people for money. Not if I was going to raise a kid. The enforcer, Sarah said quietly. Yeah. Tyler took a breath that sounded painful. Walked away from all of it. Changed my number, moved across the city, learned to fix cars. Figured out how to be a dad. I thought, his voice broke again. I thought if I just became someone different, if I was good enough for long enough, the past wouldn't matter anymore. But it does. It always does. Sarah studied his profile in the dashboard light. Strong jaw, straight nose, the face of a man who'd figured out how to live with what he'd done. You're a good father, Tyler. Whatever you were before, you're a good father now. Am I? The laugh that came out of him was bitter. Good fathers don't get their daughters kidnapped by people they destroyed 10 years ago. Sarah didn't have an answer for that. The warehouse came into view, a hulking concrete shadow against the night sky. Tyler pulled into the empty parking lot and cut the engine. The building looked abandoned. Dark windows, graffiti crawling across the loading dock doors, chain-link fence sagging in places. Sarah checked her phone. 2:45. 3 hours and 45 minutes until sunrise. They got out of the truck. The air smelled like rain and rust and something else. Something organic and wrong. Tyler moved toward the warehouse with a certainty that made Sarah's stomach turn. He knew this place in his bones. Knew it the way you know your childhood home even in the dark. She followed him to a side door hanging half open, the lock long since broken. Inside, their footsteps echoed in vast, empty space. The warehouse was gutted. Nothing but concrete floors and steel support beams, and the ghosts of whatever had been stored here once. Pigeons roosted somewhere in the rafters, their soft cooing the only sound, besides Sarah's breathing. Tyler pulled out his phone and swept the flashlight beam across the floor. It caught on something small and bright near the center of the space. Sarah moved closer, her shoes crunching on broken glass and debris. Lily's dinosaur keychain, the plastic T-Rex she'd gotten at the museum last month and attached to her backpack with such pride. Next to it, another note. Tyler picked them both up with shaking hands. Sarah read over his shoulder. Second stop, where you learned what power feels like, where they taught you to break bones efficiently. You know the place. What does that mean? Sarah asked. Tyler was staring at the note like it might catch fire. The gym. There was a boxing gym on Rainier Avenue where my boss had his office in the back. That's where I got my orders, where they taught me how to hurt people the right way. Sarah felt sick. How far? 20 minutes. They got back in the truck. The city was waking up now in small increments. A few more cars on the roads, lights coming on in apartment windows, the first buses starting their routes. Sarah thought about all those people sleeping safely in their beds, oblivious to this nightmare unfolding in the hours before dawn. She thought about Brett Carson, a man she'd never met, who'd spent 10 years planning revenge. She thought about Lily, small and terrified, somewhere out there waiting for her father to save her. Tyler, she said, when we find Brett, what are you going to do? He didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was barely above a whisper. Whatever it takes to get her back. That was what Sarah was afraid of. The boxing gym was in a neighborhood that looked like it had given up decades ago. Barred windows, chain-link fences with razor wire, buildings that sagged under their own weight. The gym itself was dark, but the front door hung open. Tyler pushed through, and they stepped into a smell that hit Sarah like a physical wall. Sweat and leather, and old blood and disinfectant that couldn't quite cover the rot underneath. The main room had a ring in the center, heavy bags hanging from chains, speed bags on the walls. Everything coated in dust thick enough to write in. Tyler's flashlight swept the space until it found what they were looking for. Another note taped to the ring post. And next to it, on the canvas, one small pink shoe with purple laces. Sarah picked up the shoe while Tyler read the note. It was tiny in her hands, still tied the way Lily always tied it. Bunny ears method, never the loop-swoop-pull that Tyler had tried to teach her. Seeing it there, separated from the little girl who wore it, made something fierce and protective rise up in Sarah's chest. This was real. This was happening. Some man had taken a child and was playing games while that child sat somewhere in the dark, scared and alone. "What does it say?" Sarah asked, her voice harder than she meant it to be. Tyler's face had gone pale in the flashlight glow. "Says, remember Jake Morrison. He remembers you too. Go ask him where the final stop is. He's waiting at the usual place." "Who's Jake Morrison?" "My old partner. The one who trained me. We did jobs together until I walked away." Tyler crumpled the note in his fist. "Haven't seen him in 10 years. If he's part of this, where would he be?" "Bar on Capitol Hill, underground place, not in any directory. That's where the old crew still meets." Sarah checked her phone. 3:39, 2 hours and 51 minutes. "Then we go." The drive took them through streets getting busier by the minute. Early shift workers heading to hospitals and bakeries and warehouses. Delivery trucks making rounds. The world waking up while Sarah felt like she was moving through a nightmare. She kept thinking about Lily's face, kept imagining how scared the girl must be. Tyler parked in an alley behind a building that looked like it might collapse if you sneezed near it. There was a door at ground level, painted black, no sign or number. Tyler knocked in a specific pattern. 3 fast, pause, 2 slow. A slot opened at eye level. Someone looked out, scanned them both, and the door swung inward. Inside was the kind of place that existed in the cracks of the law. Dark, despite the no-smoking ordinances, filled with smoke that hung in layers. Men who looked like they'd done time, and women who looked like they'd survived worse. Tyler moved through the crowd like he'd done it 1,000 times before, and Sarah followed close, hyper-aware of every eye tracking their movement. She was used to emergency rooms, used to crisis and chaos, but this was different. This was a world where different rules applied, and she didn't know what they were. Jake Morrison sat alone at a table in the back corner. Older than Tyler, maybe early 50s, with gray threading through his beard and scars on his knuckles that looked like they had stories. When he saw Tyler, he smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reached his eyes. "Well, well," Jake said, his voice like gravel. "Tyler Brooks, heard you went soft. Got yourself a kid and a conscience." Tyler sat down across from him. Sarah stayed standing, ready to move if she needed to. "Where is she, Jake?" "Your girl." Jake leaned back in his chair, sipped something dark from a tumbler. "That's not really my business, is it? I'm just the middleman." "Brett Carson hired you." "Brett's got a score to settle. I'm just helping an old friend." Jake's eyes slid to Sarah. "Who's this? Your moral compass. Where's the final location?" Tyler's voice had gone flat, dangerous. Sarah recognized the shift, the way he became someone else. Jake set down his drink slowly. "Brett says I'm supposed to give you an address, but first, he wants to make sure you understand something." He pulled a folded piece of paper from his jacket pocket, but didn't hand it over yet. "You took everything from him, his business, his family, his dignity. You made him bleed in front of everyone who respected him. Made him into nothing. You remember that?" "Yes," Tyler said. "Good. Because he remembers too. Every day for 10 years. Jake slid the paper across the table. "The address is on there. But Tyler, he doesn't want to just talk. He wants what you gave him. He wants you to bleed." Tyler took the paper without looking at it. "If he hurts her, he won't. Not if you show up alone. Not if you give him what he wants." Jake picked up his drink again. Eye for an eye, brother. That's how these things work. Sarah grabbed Tyler's arm before he could lunge across the table. She could feel the tension coiled in him, ready to explode. Tyler! Lily! Remember, Lily! That stopped him. He looked at Sarah, and she watched him force himself back under control, watched him choose his daughter over his rage. He stood up. The paper crumpled in his fist. If she's hurt, he said to Jake, I'm coming back. Jake shrugged. Get in line. They left the bar and got back in the truck. Tyler's hands shook as he unfolded the paper. An address in block letters. Sarah checked the time. 4:23. 2 hours and 7 minutes. The sky was starting to lighten at the edges, that pre-dawn gray that meant the night was running out of time. I know this address, Tyler said, his voice hollow. It's not the construction site yet. This is... He stopped, stared at the paper. This is where Brett used to live. His old apartment. Sarah's stomach dropped. Why would he send us there? I don't know. But Tyler was already starting the engine. We're about to find out. The apartment building was in a part of town that had seen better days 3 decades ago. 4 stories, brick facade, fire escapes rusting on the outside. Most of the windows were dark. Tyler parked on the street and they approached on foot. The front door was propped open with a brick. The lobby smelled like mildew and someone's abandoned dinner. Tyler checked the address again. 3rd floor, apartment 307. They climbed the stairs. No elevator, just concrete steps with metal railings and graffiti on the walls. When they reached the 3rd floor, Tyler found the right door. It was already open, hanging on its hinges, like someone had kicked it in a long time ago and never bothered to fix it. Inside was darkness and the smell of abandonment. Tyler used his phone flashlight again. The beam swept across an empty living room, walls with holes punched in them, floor covered in old newspapers and fast food wrappers. This place had been empty for years. But on the walls, Sarah's breath caught. Every single wall was covered in photographs, hundreds of them, maybe thousands. All of Tyler. Tyler at the grocery store with Lily. Tyler at Lily's soccer games. Tyler working under the hood of his truck. Tyler walking Lily to school. Tyler and Lily at the park. Tyler alone at night, walking home from work. Tyler and Sarah having coffee at the diner down the street from her apartment. Every moment of Tyler's life for what must have been years, documented and pinned to these walls like a shrine. Jesus, Tyler whispered. Sarah moved closer, her skin crawling. The photos were organized chronologically, she realized. Starting on the left wall with older images, Tyler looking younger, Lily smaller, and progressing clockwise around the room. The most recent photos were dated just days ago, written on some of them in the same block letters from the notes. Playing happy family. Pretending the past doesn't exist. Thinking he's safe. In the center of the room sat a card table with a single chair. On the table, a notebook. Tyler picked it up with shaking hands and opened it. Sarah moved to read over his shoulder. The first entry was dated 10 years ago. Day 1. Got out of the hospital today. Wife wouldn't look at me. Daughter cried when she saw my face. Tyler Brooks did this. Tyler Brooks gets to walk away while my life ends. Sarah flipped through more pages. Months of entries, then years. The handwriting started neat and controlled, then gradually deteriorated into something more frantic. Tyler Brooks. Tyler Brooks. Tyler Brooks. Over and over. Pages of planning. Pages of rage. Pages documenting every detail of Tyler's new life, while Brett's old life stayed broken. One entry made Sarah stop. She read it out loud, her voice barely above a whisper. He took everything. Now I take his everything. He made me bleed in front of everyone I knew. Now he bleeds in front of his daughter. She gets to see what kind of man her father really is. Tyler's face had gone gray. He was looking at the walls, at the hundreds of photos tracking his every move. He's been watching me for years. All this time, I thought I'd moved on. I thought I was safe. But he was there. Every day. Just waiting. Sarah felt cold all the way to her bones. This wasn't just revenge. This was obsession. Brett Carson had spent a decade of his life focused on nothing but Tyler, documenting him like a specimen, planning this moment. She grabbed another notebook from the table, this one smaller. Inside were detailed plans, diagrams of Tyler's apartment building, Lily's school schedule, her soccer practice times, maps with routes marked, names and addresses, Jake Morrison, the warehouse, the gym, this apartment, all leading to one final location. The construction site, Sarah said, reading the last page. Where it all started. That's where he has her. Tyler was still staring at the walls, at all those moments of his life that he thought were private, turned into something else under Brett's gaze. He's been planning this for 10 years. Every detail. He knew exactly how to get to me. Tyler. Sarah grabbed his arm, made him look at her. We need to go. Now. Lily's at that construction site, and we're running out of time. Tyler blinked, shook his head like he was trying to clear water from his ears. Yeah, you're right. He dropped the notebook back on the table. Let's go. They left the apartment and its walls of watching eyes. Sarah checked her phone as they hit the stairs. 4:47. 1 hour and 43 minutes until sunrise. She thought about Brett Carson sitting somewhere with Lily, waiting. Thought about all those years of obsession, all that planning, all that rage compressed into one moment. What would a man like that do when Tyler finally showed up? She was afraid she already knew. The construction site was on the outskirts of the city, where Seattle bled into industrial parks and half-finished developments. Tyler drove faster now, weaving through early morning traffic. The sky was definitely lighter, that gray blue that came before the sun. Sarah could see his face more clearly now without the truck's interior lights. The fear was still there, but something else too. Resignation, maybe. Like he'd been waiting for this moment for 10 years, same as Brett. They parked on the street and approached on foot. The site was a half-finished office building, all exposed steel beams and concrete foundation. Chain-link fence surrounded it with signs that said, "No trespassing," and "Hard Hat Area." The gate stood open. Tyler went through first, Sarah right behind him. In the center of the foundation, next to a metal shipping container, stood a man. Even from 50 yards away, Sarah could see Lily inside the container. Her hands were bound with zip ties. Her face was streaked with tears. She looked so small, so impossibly small. And when she saw Tyler, she started crying harder. "Lily!" Tyler broke into a run. "Stop!" Brett Carson's voice cut through the morning air. He raised one hand, and Sarah saw he was holding something. A remote control. "Come any closer and I press this button. Container locks automatically. Your daughter suffocates. Takes about 90 minutes for a child that size. You want to test it?" Tyler froze. Sarah caught up to him, grabbed his arm again. Brett Carson was shorter than she'd expected, stocky, with thinning hair, and a face that looked like it had been rearranged badly. He wore a work jacket despite the mild weather, and jeans with concrete dust on them. In his other hand, not the one holding the remote, he held nothing. No weapon. Just his fists. "Brett," Tyler said, his voice cracking. "Please. She's 8 years old. She didn't do anything. This is between you and me. My daughter was 6. Brett's voice was steady, controlled, the voice of a man who'd practiced this moment 1,000 times. 6 years old when she watched the cops take me away after you put me in the hospital. 6 years old when her mother told her Daddy wasn't coming home because Daddy was dangerous. You know what that does to a kid? Sarah looked at Lily. The girl had stopped crying, was just watching her father with wide, terrified eyes. Sarah wanted to run to her, wanted to tear that container open and get her out. But Brett's finger was on that button, and she didn't doubt he'd press it. "I'm sorry," Tyler said. "God, Brett, I'm so sorry. I was a different person then. I didn't think about—" "You didn't think at all. That's the problem." Brett took a step forward. "You just followed orders. Broke bones, ruined lives. Then you got to walk away. Got to start over. Got yourself a daughter and played house while mine grew up thinking I was a monster." Tyler's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "What do you want? You want me to turn myself in? I'll do it. I'll tell the police everything I did. Every job, every person I hurt. Just let her go." "That's not enough." Brett shook his head. "I spent 10 years watching you become the father I never got to be. Watching you smile and laugh and live like the past didn't matter. Like I didn't matter. You want your daughter back? You take the beating I took, right here, right now. I get to hit you however I want, and you don't fight back. You do that, she goes free." Sarah felt her heart stop. She looked at Tyler, saw him look at Lily, then back at Brett, saw him nod slowly. "Okay," Tyler said. "Tyler, no." Sarah started. "Sarah." He looked at her, and his eyes were clear, calm, like he'd been waiting for this moment his whole life. "It's okay. This is how it has to be. This is the price." He walked forward, away from Sarah, toward the center of the foundation. When he reached the spot Brett indicated, the exact spot where Brett had bled 10 years ago, he dropped to his knees, put his hands behind his back, looked up at Brett with his face exposed and vulnerable. "Do it," Tyler said. "Just let her go when you're done." Brett circled around him, still holding the remote. "You really love her, don't you? Your daughter? You'd do anything for her." "Yes. That's what I felt too, what I still feel. But I didn't get the chance to prove it. You took that from me." Brett's first punch came fast, catching Tyler in the jaw. Tyler's head snapped to the side, but he didn't make a sound. Brett hit him again. Again. The sound of fist on flesh echoed across the empty construction site. Sarah watched, tears streaming down her face. She wanted to stop this, wanted to scream, but she knew if she moved, if she interfered, Brett might press that button. Lily was screaming now, her voice high and thin, begging Brett to stop, begging her daddy to fight back. But Tyler just knelt there and took it. Blood ran from his nose, his lips split open, and still Brett kept hitting him. 4 punches, 5, 6. Tyler swayed on his knees but didn't fall. His face was a mess of blood and swelling. Brett pulled back for another punch, and that's when he stopped. Looked at Lily screaming in the container. Looked at Tyler kneeling in the dirt. Looked at his own fist, covered in blood. "I wanted you to feel what I felt," Brett said, his voice breaking now. "Wanted you to know that pain, that helplessness. But this—" He looked at Lily again, really looked at her. "This isn't justice. This is just more pain. Another little girl watching her father get destroyed. Another cycle of violence." Tyler raised his head slowly. His face was barely recognizable, but his eyes were clear. "I'm sorry," he said, the words wet with blood. "I can't fix what I did to you. Can't give you back those years. But I changed. I'm not that person anymore. Lily made me better. Made me want to be better." Brett lowered his fist. "My daughter. Her name's Claire. She's 18 now. She reached out to me 3 months ago. After all these years, she wants to know me again. Wants to understand what happened." He looked at the remote in his hand, like he'd forgotten it was there. "I started planning this before that, before she came back. I thought revenge would make me whole again. But it won't. It won't give me back what I lost." Sarah felt something shift in the air, some tension releasing. She took a cautious step forward. "Then let her go, Brett. Let Lily go. You don't want to be the man who hurts children. That's not who you are." Brett looked at her, then at Tyler, then at Lily crying in the container. "No," he said quietly. "No, I don't." He dropped the remote on the ground. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I needed you to see. Needed you to understand." Sarah ran, sprinted across the concrete foundation to the container, and yanked the door open. Lily tumbled out into her arms, sobbing. Sarah held her close, felt the little girl's heart racing like a trapped bird, and looked back at Tyler. He was still on his knees, still bleeding, but he was smiling through the blood. Actually smiling. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have called the police. A witness, security, someone who saw what was happening. Brett heard them and nodded slowly, like he'd expected this. "I'll wait," he said. "I'll tell them what I did. What you did 10 years ago, too. Maybe we both get to answer for our choices." Tyler nodded, tried to stand, and almost fell. Sarah left Lily for a moment to help him, got under his shoulder, and supported his weight. "Can you walk?" "Yeah." His voice was thick, slurred. "Get Lily, please." Sarah went back to the little girl, picked her up even though she was really too big to carry anymore. Lily wrapped her arms around Sarah's neck and buried her face against her shoulder. Tyler limped over to them, and Lily reached out one hand to touch her father's battered face. "You came," she whispered. "You saved me." "Always," Tyler said, his voice breaking. "Always, baby. I'm so sorry." The police arrived 5 minutes later, 3 cars with lights flashing. Paramedics came with them. Sarah shifted into nurse mode automatically, checking Lily for injuries, while Tyler was loaded into an ambulance. Brett Carson stood with his hands visible, not resisting when officers approached. He didn't try to explain or justify, just let them cuff him and read him his rights. One of the officers, a woman with gray hair and tired eyes, came over to where Sarah sat with Lily. "Ma'am, we're going to need statements from both of you." "Can it wait?" Sarah asked. "She needs to be checked out at the hospital, and I want to stay with her father." The officer looked at Lily, then nodded. "We'll meet you there, but we'll need to talk to all of you eventually, including Mr. Brooks about his history with Mr. Carson." Sarah understood. This wasn't over. The night might be ending, but the reckoning was just beginning. At the hospital, Tyler was treated for a broken nose, fractured ribs, severe facial contusions, and a concussion. Lily was examined for trauma and injuries, found to be physically unharmed, but emotionally shaken. Sarah sat with them both in the ER, her own workplace feeling surreal from this side of things. Nurses she worked with every day moved around them with professional efficiency, pretending not to recognize her, but giving her space anyway. Tyler lay in the hospital bed, with his face bandaged and swollen. Lily sat next to him on the bed, holding his hand carefully like he might break. Sarah sat in the chair by the window and watched dawn fully break over Seattle. The sun came up gold and warm, and it felt wrong somehow. The night had been cold and dark and full of fear. The day shouldn't be allowed to be beautiful. A detective came by around 8 in the morning, different from the officer at the scene, younger, with sharp eyes that didn't miss anything. He asked questions gently but thoroughly. What happened? Why? Who knew what when? Tyler answered everything honestly, his voice thick but clear. He told the detective about his past as an enforcer, about Brett Carson and what he'd done, about the 10 years he'd spent trying to be better. The detective took notes and didn't judge, at least not out loud. "We'll need you to come to the station when you're released. Give a full statement. Mr. Carson is in custody, But there are other people we'll need information about. Your former employer, other people involved in the loan operation. I'll tell you everything, Tyler said. Names, places, jobs, all of it. The detective nodded. That'll help. Both in Mr. Carson's case and in any prosecution of the larger operation. He looked at Lily, then back at Tyler. For what it's worth, Mr. Brooks, what you did tonight, that took courage. Not everyone would make that choice. After the detective left, the three of them sat in silence for a while. Lily eventually fell asleep sitting up, exhausted by fear and relief. Tyler looked at her with eyes that were barely visible through the swelling, and Sarah saw something in his expression she'd never seen before. Not just love. Not just relief. Something deeper. Peace, maybe. The peace of a man who'd finally paid a debt he'd carried for a decade. Thank you, he said to Sarah quietly, not wanting to wake Lily. For everything. For believing I could be better than what I was. Sarah thought about the Tyler she'd known for 5 years, the mechanic who fixed cars and raised his daughter and showed up when people needed him. Then she thought about the man who'd knelt in that construction site and let himself be beaten to save that daughter. They weren't different people. They were the same person, just separated by time and love, and a little girl who'd given him a reason to change. You are better, Sarah said. That's what tonight proved. 3 weeks later, Sarah sat in her apartment reading the news on her phone. Tyler had cooperated fully with the police, providing information about the loan operation he'd worked for 10 years ago. Several arrests had been made, including his former boss and 2 other enforcers. Tyler himself faced no criminal charges. Statute of limitations had run out on everything he'd been involved in, and his cooperation had been valuable. Brett Carson was sentenced to 18 months for kidnapping, with credit for time served and mandatory psychiatric evaluation. According to the news article, his daughter Claire had visited him twice. They were talking about what came next. A knock on Sarah's door made her look up. When she opened it, Tyler stood there with Lily beside him. His face was still bruised but healing, the swelling mostly gone. Lily wore both shoes and carried a drawing she'd made. We brought you something, Lily said, handing over the picture. It was a T-Rex eating pizza, like always. But this time there was a person next to the dinosaur, a woman with dark hair and kind eyes. Sarah recognized herself. It's beautiful, she said, and meant it. Tyler smiled. It didn't hurt his face as much as it had a few weeks ago. Wanted to say thank you again. Couldn't have made it without you. You would have found a way, Sarah said. You always do. They stood there in her doorway, the three of them, as morning light streamed through her windows. Sarah thought about that night, the darkness, the fear, the 4 hours that had changed everything. Thought about how some debts get paid in blood and others get paid in truth. How redemption isn't a single moment, but a series of choices, made over and over, to be better than what you were before. Come in, she said. I made coffee. They came in. Lily sat at Sarah's kitchen table and asked for hot chocolate instead. Tyler sat across from her and watched his daughter with eyes that still held shadows, but also something new. Hope, maybe. Or just the quiet knowledge that he'd faced the worst parts of himself and survived. Sarah made the coffee and the hot chocolate, and they sat together in her small kitchen while the city woke up outside. It wasn't a perfect ending. Tyler still had meetings with prosecutors ahead of him. Brett Carson was in jail. Lily would need therapy to process what had happened. But they were here, alive and together, and that meant something. Sometimes redemption doesn't come quietly. Sometimes it kicks down your door at 2 a.m. and demands you prove you've changed. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you find out you have. That the person you've been trying to become is real, is worth fighting for, is worth bleeding for. Sarah looked at Tyler, at Lily, at the morning light making patterns on her kitchen wall. She thought about that night and everything they'd moved through to get here. Thought about Brett Carson and the revenge he'd abandoned at the last moment. Thought about how violence echoes through time, damaging everyone it touches, and how sometimes, not always, but sometimes, people find a way to break that cycle. "Aunt Sarah," Lily said, "can I draw you another picture?" "Of course," Sarah said. "What are you going to draw?" Lily considered, her face serious. "A family. A really strong family that stays together no matter what." Tyler met Sarah's eyes across the table. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The little girl between them, with her crayons, and her certainty that families could survive anything, said it all. Outside, morning traffic picked up. People drove to work, dropped kids at school, moved through their ordinary lives with no idea what had happened in the dark hours before dawn. Sarah was glad for that. Glad most people never had to face what they'd faced, never had to choose between violence and sacrifice, never had to kneel in the dirt and bleed for redemption. But she was also glad she'd been there. Glad she'd opened her door at 2 in the morning when Tyler knocked. Glad she'd followed him into the darkness and helped him find his way back. That's what friends did. What family did. They showed up. They stayed. They held on even when everything fell apart. Sarah poured herself more coffee and watched Lily draw. The picture was taking shape. Stick figures holding hands, a house with windows, a sun in the corner. Simple. Childlike. Perfect. Tyler watched too, and when Lily looked up to show them her progress, he smiled without wincing. "That's us," Lily said proudly. "That's our family." "Yeah," Tyler said, his voice rough with emotion. "That's us." And Sarah looked at the three of them. The single dad who'd fought his way back from darkness, the little girl who'd given him reason to change, and herself, the friend who'd believed he could, and thought that maybe, just maybe, they were all going to be okay. The sun rose higher, the city moved on, and in Sarah Mitchell's small kitchen, a family that had survived the night sat together and drew pictures of better days ahead.